And excellent. We've got Theodora, we've got Hedda, or I think it's Hedda, and Carolyn. Good to have you with us on the webinar. And for those of you who are with me on Facebook, I would love it if you would take a moment and introduce yourself. Just let me know that you're there. It's just so much more fun when I know who's with me. If you are joining me on Instagram as well, I would love to know who you are and where you're from. Today, we are going to get started and we're going to talk about, we'll give it just one more minute. We're still a minute or so before our time. So I'm glad that you are with me. Theodora, I know where Theodora is from because she's one of my graduates. Carolyn, I'd love to know where you're from. And if you're with me on Facebook, I would love to know who you are, your name. Oh, Dee. Hi, Dee. I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you on Facebook. So good to have you with me today. And for those of you who are joining us on Instagram, I'd love to know who you are and where you're from as well. All righty. Yeah, and we've got Kay Fost joining us as well. Again, love it if you would take a moment and just let me know who you are and where you're from. I would also like to know what background you have. Are you a herbalist, a nutrition coach, a naturopath? What is your holistic healing background? And I'd love to know if you have any iridology background as well. Now, why would I want to know that? Hi, Nick. Thank you for joining me on Instagram. Good to see you. I like to know the background of the people that I am with, and simply because I like to tweak my presentations on the fly. And if I know that we have a lot of brand new people who don't know anything really about iridology yet, then I'll make sure that I am giving them the background information they need. If I know I'm working with people who are primarily educated in holistic healing, I can bend the presentation that direction as well. So if you'd let me know what your background is, that will help me to make the next 30 to 45 minutes with you useful for you. My goal here is to give you information that is valuable for you. So please let me know what your background is. Thank you, Dee. She says she's new to iridology. That's great. Carolyn says she's an iridologist and an optician. Ooh, that's a great blend in a shop in Scotland full time. Carolyn, welcome. That's powerful. Powerful to have that background. Fabulous. And anybody else who wants to weigh in, I would love to know a little bit about you as well. So if you see me looking away from the camera, it's because I'm monitoring Facebook and Instagram and following my teaching notes. Nick has been looking into iridology 4 to 5 months now, just through YouTube. Oh, Nick, please find my YouTube channel. I think it's Judith Cobb. I should know things like that, shouldn't I? But go find me on YouTube because there's like years of little free training videos there. Salmeya, welcome. Glad to have you with us on Instagram. All right. And Hedda says a nutritionist and holistic health coach. And she's got a background in iridology. Thanks for this webinar. Oh, well, welcome. I'm so glad you are with us. All right. So as we are working through today, and we've got Monica Chambers with us as well. Hi, Monica. Good to see you again. And Anne Murray. Lovely. Good to have you with me. Dee is nutrigenomics and epigenetics coach. Lovely, Dee. Good to have you with me. If you're with me on Facebook, let me know who you are so that I can make this more personal and tailored for you. One of the things that I want to do here is I want to help dispel some myths that are out there. We're going to look at some case studies today that include actual x-rays of things, literal x-rays to show us, and we've got before and after images of eyes to go with x-rays. So we are going to dispel some misconceptions about iridology that have been passed down from very old school iridologists who have not kept up with the training. That may sound like it is a harsh judgment statement. The sad truth is there are a lot of them out there that are stuck in the past and are not keeping up with current research. So I'm just going to invite you to feel free to have a conversation with me through the chat boxes and the comment boxes, and I will do everything I can to stay on top of that while we are together today. And yeah, we're going to have some fun, I hope. Love to take a moment to introduce myself. I have been a holistic practitioner for 4 decades now. I got into holistic healing because I had health problems that the medical world didn't seem to have answers for. And that was frustrating to me. And as I discovered that they didn't know as much as I'd been led to believe they knew, and that's not meant to be a disparaging comment, but they know disease, they don't know health, right? Is typically how we view it. I have the good fortune to meet the man who I married and have been married to now for 4 decades. And he was into holistic stuff, into herbs, and he had a little bit of iridology background and things like that. And he introduced me to it, and I fell in love with him. I fell in love with the holistic perspectives, and that was my start. From there, I launched full bore into learning everything that I could, and there wasn't a lot of coursework available 4 decades ago. There was very little, as a matter of fact. Over the 4 decades that I've been a holistic health coach, I have achieved master herbalist and certified herbalist from several schools, master or certified iridologist from several schools. I've got nutrition credentials from several schools as well. I've written books that I've self-published and marketed myself, including Pregnancy Naturally, the Herbal Birth Kit Handbook, Healthy Kids Naturally, The Essential Guide to Nature Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and Level 2, and Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology textbook, which is available to students in my course. I've also taught or created and taught many courses. I created a level 1 herbology course that was 20 hours of practical use information, primarily meant for in-home use. And the students loved it so much that I had to create a level 2 course, which was 16 hours of more advanced herbal usage. So we didn't teach things like how to make your own blends. We were talking about things that were commercially available. I actually had people from those courses who went on to become herbalists and began to coach people, which was very exciting for me. I also designed and taught biokinesiology and color therapy levels 1 and 2. I was a certified prenatal educator for a few years through the International Childbirth Education Association. So I designed and taught prenatal classes. And my passion right now is the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course, which is the equivalent of the IPA, International Iridology Practitioners Association, level 1 and level 2 curriculum requirements. So if you take my dynamic iridology assessment system, it is the same as doing what other instructors call IPA level 1 and IPA level 2. Stay with me to the end of our workshop today, and I'm going to share just like 30 seconds worth of information about the upcoming course. Also, just want to mention here that I am a proud certified iridologist with IPA, and and this is only the current badge they've given us. You know, it doesn't go back to the beginning of when we affiliated with them. And I'm also a certified iridology instructor with IPA. Alrighty, so now that you know who I am, so good to have you with us online, Christy, Sarah, and Rendine Donatella. Good to have you with us on Instagram. And Amina, good to have you with us on our Facebook page. This is lovely to have people with us on so many platforms from all over the world. Let's look at some eyes, and let's also look at why people think the eyes change with trauma. All right, love to have interaction with you. Feel free to comment as we go and ask questions as we go. How many of you have heard the owl story? If you've heard the owl story, can you give me a raise your hand or an I've heard it? Hello, Lifestyle. Good to see you with us on Instagram. If you've heard the owl story, let me know. Just type owl in the comments, or again, give me a thumbs up or wave at me, do something to let me know you're familiar with the owl story. Yeah, Teodora says she's heard it. Excellent. Thanks, Teodora. And we talk about this a little bit in my iridology course because we need to understand the root of this. So the story goes that in the early 1880s, Accent and Kay Frost has heard this as well. Thank you for that, Kay. And so has Lou. Excellent. And Lifestyle has not. Okay, so Lifestyle, I'm going to tell this, and I want you to know that this is myth. This is myth. The story goes that in the early 1880s, a young boy named Ignaz van Petzele, he was 11 years old. That's all we know for absolute sure. He lived in Hungary. Oh, we know that too. But he caught or trapped or found an owl or a hawk. And either this owl or hawk had a broken wing or leg when this young boy came into possession of him. And this young boy noticed that the owl's eye had a black line in it that disappeared as the bird healed. All right. So that is how the story goes. Now, the challenge with this is a couple of things. It was extrapolated from there that the same thing would happen in humans, but it has never been reproduced in humans. And it's also important to know that the iris of an animal eye is very different from the iris of a human eye. The owl eye or an animal eye only has what's called a posterior leaf. It does not have an anterior border the way a human iris does. So we can't transfer this information from one type of animal to another. Now, the other thing that I want to point out is if this actually had happened with all of the bird rescue, animal rescue kinds of facilities that are out there, wouldn't you think that a veterinarian or a technician who worked in one of these facilities where they take in damaged animals and nurse them back to health, wouldn't you think they would be talking about this? Wouldn't you think they would know about this, that they would have seen it more than once, and yet they don't? So that says to me that this maybe didn't happen. Now, what I'm also going to say is we love that it gave Ignaz van Petzele the start that it gave him, because regardless of what he saw or didn't see, whatever it was, it spurred him on that as he matured into an adult, he became curious and he started doing his own research, his own case studies of looking at people's eyes, drawing them by hand, using colored charcoals, writing out their case histories, and gradually creating iridology maps, which is very, very exciting. And we're grateful to him for that. But we know that the owl story is not accurate. We know that it's not how it really goes. And because of that, I'm going to share with you my story. Okay, this is my story, and and so I've got eye pictures from before, during, and after to show you how our eyes do not change as a result of trauma to another body part. So as you look at this eye photo, this is my left eye. Image taken March 17th, 2017. I had just gotten a brand new iridology camera and I was experimenting with it to see how things would go. I wanted to get really proficient with it, and that's what I did. Now, this would be the area in most eye charts where the arm would show up. That is a very important fact here. I want you to notice that we've got some fibers in here that are reflexives. There's a little shading between them. We've got a pigment here. This is the arm reaction field. All right, hold that image in your mind's eye, because 2019, almost exactly 2 years later, my life changed. Things got eventful. This is me waiting in the emergency room of the local hospital. I had slipped on some ice, didn't know yet how bad the damage was, but I knew it was broken. I knew there were broken bones in there. So as I waited for the x-rays, my mind goes, I got to get pictures of everything from here moving forward. So I did. So the doctor let us take pictures of the x-rays. This is one of the bone breaks. And that's a really nasty little break in there. And they've got, all the degrees of everything of how badly that is broken and how misplaced it is. And then there's another break right in here somewhere, and I'm not sure. So this is the first one we saw down here. There's another break in here somewhere. They've got it all measured off, and I don't even know exactly where the break is. All right. So broke 2 bones in one fall. Go me, go big or go home, right? This is my sad arm. A few days later, we'd had an open reduction, a double internal stabilization. So 2 surgeries in one. My poor little fingers were so swollen, I could hardly move them. Whereas the bowl of yogurt I was trying to get down with the nausea from coming out of the medications. And so, this is the slab cast where it's really only a half cast that's bandaged on. They need to leave space for the incisions to breathe a little bit. But I had presence of mind. On the 19th of March, I took photos again. Now, as we look here in the arm area, notice the fibers are a little bit wavier. That is simply because the pupil is a little bit larger. Okay, we know that large pupils are often an indication of stress. This is not a large pupil, but was I stressed? Yes, I was. I've never broken a bone before in my life. I've never had surgery like this before in my life. I was a little bit stressed and grateful for a fabulous family that just rallied to help me get through this. But you can see we don't have a black line forming in here at all. There is no black line. And yet, one would think that with having 2 breaks, 2 surgeries on one arm, and now metal plates and screws in my arm. So this was actually 2 weeks post-surgery. This was the day we changed the cast, took the surgical cast off. And yet, as we looked at that last photo, there was no change in my eye. Okay. Now I'm just going to let you know, I don't set off metal detectors, and that's a good thing. I had to fly out to a conference just about 6 weeks after this, and it was good. I didn't raise any security alerts. So here's another angle where you can see clearly there are 6 screws, 2 metal plates holding my arm together. They are permanently resident in my arm. There we go. Here's one incision, which I'm glad to say has healed very nicely. Those of you who are with me on the webinar can see it's healed very nicely. It's quite an insignificant scar. Very happy about that. And there's the one up the side of my arm, which also has healed quite nicely, although at the right angle, you can actually see the outline of the metal plate that's there. All right. So there we go. That's exactly what my arm looks like and what it looks like now. So on April 3rd, so we're now about 3 to 4 weeks post, and I'm still looking at my arm and I'm going, yeah, there's nothing in there. We didn't get a black line. I had always been taught in the first years when I learned iridology that if there was an injury like this, there would be a black line, or there would be extra fibers develop in the eye to show me that there was healing happening. There's nothing. Nothing has changed. I gave up that idea that the eye would change like 30 years ago, right? Because I had seen that it would not. So let's put these 3 images side by side. This is the March 17th. So this is 2 years prior to the injury. This is a few days after the injury and after the surgery. And this is, again, a couple weeks later. And so what we see is the shadings are all the same. The fibers here are a little bit wavier, but you can see clearly the pupil is larger. That's going to make the fibers compress like an accordion, and they're going to have to fold and pleat a little bit in order to accommodate the pupil getting larger. But there was no change. All right, so just to prove the point, I'm sure that's why I did this. A week after that cast came off, Mother's Day, no less, we were visiting one of our sons. I slipped down the stairs, landed on my arm, and broke the olecranon off on the same arm. So this is my left arm again. You normally do not have a gap like this between the end of the elbow bone and the rest of that arm bone. I will let you know that I was a very good grandmother since my grandchildren were present. As I lay on the floor, writhing in agony, the only thing that escaped my lips was, "Oh my, oh my, oh my." I did not say any bad words. I was very proud of myself. I just kept thinking my grandchildren it's bad enough that they're seeing me here in pain like this. They don't get what's gone on. And I just need to not lose my self-control here. All right, so there we are, back in the waiting room at the hospital. And my arm doesn't usually look like this, have this dimple in here. That's where the bone is separated. Now, you'd think that the hospital would give me frequent flyer points or something, that you might get bumped to the head of the line because you've been there so much lately. They don't. This again required surgery. When you break the olecranon off, there is no way for it to actually reattach without surgery, because you've got all kinds of ligaments that are connected to it that go into your upper arm to help you extend your arm. And so there's just no way to repair it without surgery. So here I am after the surgery in my half slab cast. What I did learn, side note, if you ever break an arm, surgical scrubs are the best clothes. They've got wide arms, so you can get a cast through it, and they have lots of pockets because you're not carrying things with that hand, and you need pockets. So just in case you ever need that. All right, so there we go with the elbow. I took pictures of my eye again after the surgery. So this is about 2 weeks after the surgery that I went, oh, I should be doing photos. We've got the exact same thing here. There's no change in this fiber, no change in the shading, no change in the pigment, no change in anything. And yet we now have things in the wrist, and we now have wires going through and around bones, cinched tight to hold this together so that my elbow could heal. Again, one would think that there would be a change. So when you're looking at these photos and you're saying some of them are whiter or brighter, that is simply a function of the lighting. Okay, that is not actual change in the eye. This is simply change in the lighting. I will admit I was not quite as fastidious about checking my settings as I should have been. So, but we look at that area. And again, we do not have a black line. We do not see things in here that are showing that there's been any change. Now, why is that? Why is that? That is because the break did not change my genetic structure. The break was not caused by my genetic structure. The irides show us everything that we see in the iris itself is a blueprint of our inherent programming. So what does that mean? That means that if the injury is not genetic, it's not going to show up in the eyes. And what injury is genetic? Right? And this is showing me that my arm is prone to some inflammation, perhaps, but it's not showing me that it's prone to being broken. Now I'm going to tell you, being a herbalist and a nutritionist, I'm not hugely fond of the medical world. I do believe they do their best work when it comes to trauma medicine. And I am absolutely grateful for the surgeons who worked on me. It was funny. One of the surgeons actually did my father's, as he was taking me into the OR, and I said, "Oh, I know your name. I think you've done some surgery for my dad." And I gave him my dad's name. He went, "Oh, yes. How is your father? Let me see. There was a wrist, a knee, and a hip, if I recall." And he could recall all my dad's surgeries, which was bizarre. But I'm grateful for wonderful medical care for this kind of a situation. They did a brilliant job. My physiotherapist is an absolute rock star. He told me that most people don't regain full use of their arm after this much damage, and I have like 95 to 97% full use. But then again, I padded that up with what I know about natural healing, right? Let's look at another kind of trauma. We're going to look at the sclera this time, which is different. Where the iris is genetically set, the sclera is transient. The sclera is very reactive to the situation. This is the eye of a young woman who, when she came to see me, I've actually taken care of her family since before she was conceived. And at this point in time, she was about 17 or 18 years old. And she came to see me. Her mom brought her in specifically because she had had a serious concussion, a concussion that nearly cost her her grade 12 year in school. And when we took photos, we saw this. This is what we call a trauma fork. And it tells us that there has been a significant trauma to the body. Something, it could be a toxic thing, it could be a physical thing. In her case, one of her classmates thought it would be funny to whack her on the head really hard with a very thick book. It was not funny. It caused this serious concussion. And this is showing us that the impact had a significant impact on her brain. All right. And even though this was about 5 months after the fact, it is showing us that there was residual effect. All right. And so she will always need to be a little bit careful. She is now 22. They've moved to another city, so I don't have access to her eyes anymore to do photos. But this is something that she will need to be aware of, that any further head traumas she's already primed to have problems with that. So if she has a head trauma, it's going to bring back all of the previous symptoms and more, right? If she had been able to fully resolve the trauma and undo all the damage that had been done, this would have faded to almost nothing. It would have become a very thin blood vessel like some of these other ones are. The fact that it still has some body to it, some weight to it, suggests that there will be residual effects for the long term. Here's another example of a trauma fork. The closer the trauma fork is to the limbus of the iris, the more serious it is, because the more impact it has on the tissues. And so we need to know, what organ is this correlated to? If we come straight in, what would be the organ that is in here? And in this case, again, it would be brain. But this one, again, was not nearly as serious, and it's not having the same kind of intense long-term effect that the previous slide showed for the other client. These are the eye photos of a young man who was in his early 20s. This is the before photo. This is the after photo. So again, this is one of my sons. So all of my children get to be guinea pigs, that when I get new equipment, I have them all come over for dinner and I take pictures of their eyes, or I experiment with the new equipment on them. So I had just gotten my new camera. When we look for his predispositions, for a hernia, that would be abdominal. And so we might see some tissue weakness in this area of the eye or in this area of the eye, particularly in what we would consider to be about zone 4. So right in here, we would expect to see something significant. He did not have a hernia when this picture was taken. Then he developed a hernia. And I got a new camera where the lighting is much more gentle and allows the pupil to retain most of its natural size. So we see that he tends to be a little more on the sympathetic response side because his pupils stayed large. But we're going to look again in the areas that talk about the abdominal wall. This is after he had had the surgery. He had the mesh inserted, all that good stuff. And this would have been just a week or two after the surgery. Nothing. We're not seeing a separation in fibers. We're not seeing a black line. We're not seeing anything that says he's had a surgery. And so again, we've got the before and after. You would think with a surgery that has something inserted into the body, whether it's a mesh or whether it's a metal plate or a piece of wire, that something, if I was going to change, that something would actually show up, and it doesn't. It does not show up. Here again, the eyes of a fellow who is 39 years old, was 39 when we took this photo. And so when we come back to this photo, he would have been 36. At this point in time, he was starting to have some bowel symptoms, but there was nothing definitive. His bowel symptoms were that he was having a little bit of blood on his stool. Notice he's got this pigment right here, this little splattery bit of pigment. For those of you who are on Instagram, let me bring my camera closer for you. See this pigment right here, right? And there's a little bit more up here. And we've got a pinch in here, which is teaching us that the colon itself, at the base of the descending colon before it comes into the sigmoid, probably is somewhat strictured, pulled down a little bit tight. All right. And then 2 years prior to being diagnosed with, so he was diagnosed with colon cancer last fall. 2 years prior, we see the exact same eye. We have the same pigment. There's nothing there that's changed. Here we go. 6 weeks post-surgery, same day, same camera, different lighting. So you're going to see there's a difference in the skin tones, a difference in the sclerotones, a difference in the iris images themselves as far as color goes. But again, he's now had about 12 inches of his colon removed, his descending colon, and it's resectioned so that his transverse colon is now connected to his sigmoid. And even he's had the surgery, there's no change here. We've got the same pigment, we've got the same shadings, everything is the same. And it doesn't matter if we change cameras, we see the same key markings. Nothing has changed. One would think that again with a cancer, with a surgery where something's been removed, that we would see some kind of a change if the iris was going to change. And so, but we didn't, because having that part of his bowel removed didn't change his genetic structure. If he was to father a child, that child would not inherit the tendency to have 12 inches less colon, right? And that is why the eyes don't change, because this did not change his genetic structure. All right. Oops, I did not update that. The next live course is not starting April 21st. It is starting September 9th. I thought I had updated all of these. Apparently I didn't. So September 9th is our next course. Start date, 22-hour-long live webinar classes designed to give you all of the IPA level 1 and level 2 curriculum, but also designed to teach you how to use iridology and how to use iridology and how to implement it in your practice. Now, Enza on Facebook is saying, I always understood when under anesthesia, the brain has no memory of the surgery, so there will not be a change in the iris. Enza, I would have also thought, though, that considering the broken bones, for instance, that that was the broken bones didn't happen under anesthesia. So it should be that if there's going to be a change, that it will show. I also understand that even though our brain has no memory, our brain still has the receptive ability. This is why when it's been shown that if surgeons and people in the operating room are negative and making negative comments about the patient heals less well. If they are making positive comments about the patient heals faster and better. So there is still some subconscious receptivity there. So that's very interesting. All right, so Confident Nutritionist, Dynamic Iridology, and again, 30 seconds here, is the only live, online, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, and naturopaths who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. I find that way too many holistic practitioners see the client, then they go off on their own and spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours of their own time creating a program that they bring back to the client, and the practitioners are not getting paid for that program development time. And they're not charging enough on an hourly wage for an appointment to actually make it worth doing. So when I teach iridology, I also teach you how to think through and create a program for your client that will take your client to the next step in their health, take them up one level, not a lifetime program, but a next step program that will help your client to stay on track better, to get better results. And it will also make them want to come back and see you again so that you can build the next step for them. The goal is to teach you constitutional iridology and how to use it confidently so that you can easily integrate what you already know about nutrition and herbology and whatever other modalities you use to confidently create doable client programs in your paid client sessions. That is so, so important. So the next course start date is September 9th. The classes will run 12 till 2 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Do use a time zone, a time and date converter if you're not in North America. Early registration is going to be starting in July. I only take 10 students per class. And I would encourage you that if you are interested in learning more about the program, send me your email address, PM it to me, direct message it, however you want to get it to me. And I will add you to the email list to be notified when we are doing the info webinars for the early registration. Now, that's not a commitment that you're going to take the class. It's you expressing a desire to learn more about the course and about how to get enrolled. So if you are interested in learning more about the program, PM your email address to me so I can add you to the list. Now, I'm not seeing any further questions coming in. Just give you another 30 seconds if you've got a question to get that typed in. Thank you so much for being with me for the last 40 minutes. I truly appreciate it. I hope that you have learned something that is useful to you. Maybe I've dispelled a myth. Maybe I've been able to show you where the research is taking us a little bit when it comes to iridology. And as we continue to do these free webinars, we'll do lots of case studies where we talk about creating nutrition programs and herbal programs and using this more and more in your client practice. Excellent. Dee says, wonderful. Enza says, thank you. Oh, and you're so welcome. I'm so glad that you were here with me today. And question has come in from Kay. Does the iris show genetic changes to the body immediately? No. And the reason I'm going to say that is most people are not willing to do the depth of homework to actually change their genetic structure. And so I've never seen anyone whose eyes have changed as a result of programs they've been on, because I don't believe they have worked deeply enough to change their genetic structure. They changed how the genes are manifesting, but that is not changing the genetic structure, right? So when we look at epigenetics, we are looking at the idea that we can turn genes on and off. Turning them on and off doesn't change the genes, it changes the functionality of the genes. And so the likelihood that we're actually going to be changing the genes themselves is very remote, but the likelihood that doing the right nutritional work may turn a gene on or turn a gene off is very, very real. That's a very possible option. And that's not going to change the eye structure at all. All right, that was a great question, by the way. I liked that question. And AJ1 Lucy says, where are you located? I am in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And Hedda says, informative webinar. Thank you so much. Looking forward to learning from you. Wonderful. Thank you for that. For those of you who might be interested in doing some personal iris assessment with me, reach out to me. We have ways of doing that. You could be like literally halfway across the universe. And if you can get the right kinds of eye photos to me, we can actually do appointments over Zoom. So with that, my friends, thank you again so much for being with me today. I truly appreciate it. And I hope to see you again soon. Remember to send me your email address if you would like information about the next course start date. We will talk to you later. Bye for now.